this is Austin from The Body Curious, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the exchange in the cell between oxygen and carbon dioxide, and also the role of magnesium and calcium in the cell. And for this, I'm going to actually be going on to a little presentation to just demonstrate how it looks very similar in terms of how a castle and a moat operates. So here we have an illustration of a castle. What you have is you have the stuff that's really important in what's called the keep in the center. You have the surrounding wall as a defensive mechanism. And then what you have is you have the moat, okay, which usually is, a watery moat filled with nasty things, and it's a primary means of defense. And how this works is that when the drawbridge comes down, the idea is you have goods coming in, and then you have waste going out. So how does this apply to the cell? Well, the cell is actually very similar indeed. This is a cell. And a cell, the best example of a cell that we can get our hands on actually is a chicken egg. And it's built and formed just like a human cell is, only our human cells are very, very tiny. And once our cells develop and split through a process called mitosis, we end up with a human being. In the case of a chicken egg, we get a chicken. So just like the castle, we have the precious DNA and RNA in the center, in the nucleus. And then on the outside, the defensive structure of the wall, in the case of the chicken egg, it's that white part of the egg, is the membrane. And the membrane is structurally solid, if you like. It is a good defensive mechanism when it is held together through a combination of cholesterol and triglycerides, which we think of somehow for some crazy reason that cholesterol is the bad guy, and yet actually think of cholesterol as the scaffold for the cell. And one of my best demonstrations I do, and you can do this at home, is to get a fresh egg, as fresh as you can get it, and just break it on a plate. And what you'll find is that fresh eggs that are healthy, what they will do is the white forms almost an almost perfect circle. Is because the scaffolding, that cholesterol, is holding the membrane together. It is sound. And what if you then get an egg that's a week or so old, then what you'll find is that as the cholesterol oxidizes, in other words, it breaks down, what happens is the white will just like spread across the plate and it will have no form at all. And this is the importance of why cholesterol is really important for your body and for our health. It keeps the integrity of our cells healthy. So this is the idea of the castle, as we said before. You have the keep and the wall, the nucleus and the membrane in the case of the cells. Now, what we then have is, to keep that cell healthy, there is the hydration of that cell. That means it needs water, which is kind of, how a battery functions. We need kind of fresh water, well, slightly salty fresh water. And there is an exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, think of the oxygen is the sort of the fresh air coming in, and the carbon dioxide is the waste product of all the stuff that goes on within the cell and needs to be evacuated. Otherwise, what happens is that what goes on inside the castle, it all goes rotten. So there needs to be this exchange. However, one of the key components to the exchange, apart from the system being correctly hydrated, is you need this exchange of magnesium to calcium. Is because magnesium comes in and calcium is in effect the waste product going out. And between the two of them, in many ways, it functions just like a battery. In other words, you have the water and you have the cathode and the anode, which is a combination of the calcium and the magnesium, that gives the integrity of the battery, and that literally generates an electromagnetic shield, which functions just like the moat in the castle analogy. And this is your primary defensive system. When cell is healthy, you actually have full functional, it's basically impregnable to disease. However, if you end up being stressed, then what happens is that just like when a castle is under attack, is the drawbridge comes up and actually your magnesium levels are depleted. And so the risk is just like when a castle is under siege, if it goes on for too long, problems can arise. So if we are under siege, what happens is the calcium is trapped inside and the magnesium is no longer present. So what we end up having is the cell becomes, over time, functionally toxic, if you like. Is that one is that the electromagnetic shield depletes, is because you no longer have that battery function going on. So you just have the health of the membrane as being your primary defense. And also the problem is because as you deplete magnesium and calcium levels rise, also becomes much harder for the body to absorb oxygen. Is because the CO2, the carbon dioxide in the cell, is unable to escape correctly. And so this is where I question the logic behind bombarding the system with oxygen, is that in a similar way is the function of magnesium when it comes to diabetes. From my point of view, diabetes is a magnesium deficiency problem rather than an insulin or a sugar problem, is that magnesium, think of it as the gatekeeper. It allows stuff in and out. And in the case of, say, diabetes, it's very common for you to have a high sugar or glucose level, but you have no energy. And so what happens is insulin builds up because insulin, in effect, has the password. But if there's no magnesium to open the door, then all that happens is insulin builds up and the body becomes less and less sensitive to insulin, and you have a buildup of sugars in the system, but that sugar is supposed to be being converted into energy and it doesn't. So quite often you can have high sugars in the blood, but very little is going into the cell to be translated into ATP, energy. And similar is true with regards to oxygen and carbon dioxide, is that carbon dioxide is the waste product, and you think, oh, we just need to, if we're low on O2, then we just take in a whole load of oxygen. Well, that doesn't really function in that way, is it can actually cause more problems, is that oxygen really is only required when we are under stress, and literally when we're running, we have an intake, we need intake. But the thing is, if we're bedbound and not doing it, if we're not actually making use of that oxygen, then oxygen has the possibility of becoming poisonous. I know this personally when I used to be a deep sea diver, is that one of the things, and those people who have ever done scuba will know this, is that you need, one of the key problems in diving is that there are a couple of factors you need to take into account. And part of it is when the deeper and under pressure you are, then there is a danger of too much oxygen at depth. Now, obviously, you don't want to run out of air when you're underwater. However, one of the key problems is as the pressure increases, you have to watch the concentration of oxygen, is because if oxygen goes over 21% in concentration, what happens, it will literally cause you to have an epileptic fit and die underwater. So oxygen isn't always your friend. It's just like anything else. It's that these different types of gases and different types of minerals are all our friends in their right concentrations, but they can be poisonous if they are not balanced out. And this is true with regards to the exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide. I am oversimplifying this function quite a bit here. However, I would say that it's worth considering, particularly when it comes to if you are someone with breathing difficulties, or things like long COVID and such like, it is worth looking at your nutritional intake, particularly around the subject of particular types of magnesium and the forms of magnesium you take. Is that my argument around that would be that we need, if you are being bombarded with oxygen, is that there may be plenty of oxygen in your system, but is it actually being absorbed by the cells? And I would suggest possibly not. So that is all for today. I hope this was informative. See you next time. Bye-bye.